Whispers from Below, a horror podcast by Justin W. Geis. Scary stories, both real and fake. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of Whispers from Below, a podcast by a madman for mad men. I'm your resident psychopath, Justin W. Geis, and today's topic of discussion is the Juniper tree. Now, before I get into the episode, I do just want to talk for a little bit. I am finally back. I took some time off for some personal reasons, as well as to show support for the Black Lives Matter movement and take some time to just educate myself. If you're more interested about sort of what I went through, that makes it sound really dramatic, for the past month or so, you can go check out my Instagram. I made a little bit of a post about it. I got a new tattoo and I kind of explain it in that post. The Instagram is JUTIN_geese, like the animal. But yeah, we're back and our mental health is in a decent place right now, and I miss doing this, so I had to come back and do it for my own sanity. I wanted to do this again. Schedule is going to be pretty much the same, but yes, I'm here, I'm back, and I figured it would be fun to start off this sort of new segment. I'm still considering this season 2 because the season 2 was really short. But our new segment, I wanted to start off with yet another Grimm's fairy tale, which is something that I haven't done in a while. Just a warning for this episode. There is quite a bit of gruesome imagery. I would say that's a good way of putting it. There's child abuse, there's cannibalism, there's a lot of biblical symbolism. If any of this stuff is, there's violence. If any of this stuff is kind of a trigger for you or seems like a topic that you're not really into, then please don't listen. I would say I don't go into too much detail about anything that happens. So I would say that this is technically supposed to be a children's story. Grimm's fairy tales are kind of cautionary tales and stuff like that. So I would say younger audience members can listen to it, but maybe not too young. There's a lot of dark stuff in it. But without further ado, let's talk about the Juniper tree. So this was a book published in 1812 by the Brothers Grimm, as I've kind of already stated. And again, it contains child abuse and cannibalism and stuff like that. So then let's get into the plot. I don't really know how to preface it without ruining the story, but the tree really has nothing to do with it. Let's put it that way. The tree really does not play a huge role. It's not like the Giving Tree. It's a little different than that. So basically, it starts out with a wealthy, kind couple, and they pray every day to God that he will grant them a child. This all happens during winter. The wife sort of peels an apple out in the courtyard underneath the juniper tree, and she cuts her finger. The blood drops onto the snow, and as we know from our previous Brothers Grimm episode about Snow White, if you haven't listened to that, go back and check it out. Look at that plug. It's plugs. They just happen. You get used to it, and then you keep doing it. Look at me go. The blood drops onto the snow, and she wishes that she had a child that was as white as snow and as red as blood. Do with that information what you will. It seems to be a pretty common thing. I don't know why blood is such a huge thing in these fairy tales, but for some reason it's a color that is very sought after. I don't know. If you're looking for pale people with a lot of blood, apparently I'm the ideal. But it's not really a joke. I guess more of a statement. Anyway. About 6 months later, she eats a bunch of juniper berries and gets super duper sick. And she tells her husband, if I die, I want to be buried beneath the juniper tree because it means so much to me. A month after that, she gives birth to a young boy that is white as snow and red as blood, and she dies of happiness. That's a weird statement to me. I feel like she died of childbirth, but they didn't want to scare people into thinking that you die from childbirth. So she died of happiness. Woo. And her husband does bury her underneath the juniper tree. The father ends up remarrying, And the stepdaughter, or the, wow, that would be gross. No, the husband and the stepmother end up having a child together, and her name is Marlinchin. Like Marlin, like the fish, and then Chen, like Chen. In some versions of the story, her name is Marlene. It's also Marjorie, or sometimes it's even Anne Marie. Depends on sort of like the region that you find it in, but the original story is Marlinchin. The stepmother like hates her stepson, like hates him so much. She keeps saying that like she wants Marlinchin to inherit this wealth from their father. He doesn't deserve it, so she ends up like beating him, mentally abusing him, making him do all these chores around the house, kind of like Cinderella, but like darker. Like she beats the crap out of him all the time. One day she hatches this like super devious plan to sort of like get rid of him for good, so that Marlinchin can take over and everything will be fine. She ends up deciding to place a chest with a bunch of apples in it in the middle of like an empty room, and she invites both the kids in. And Marlinchin says, "Can I please have an apple?" And she's like, "Of course, darling. I love you so much." So Marlinchin reaches into the chest and grabs an apple. Now that, he's seen that this seems like a safe option, he also asks for an apple. And the mother is like, "Of course, just reach in." Marlinchin leaves. And when the boy reaches his head in to grab an apple, the stepmother, gross warning, slams the chest down on his neck and decapitates him. So, we don't really have time. Does anybody? I love John Mulaney. I'm about to ask you, like, you're here. Does anybody watch John Mulaney? I'm obsessed with John Mulaney, and he has this little bit in, I think, Radio City, his Radio City one, where he goes, "We don't have time to unpack all of that," and that was just what came to my brain. We don't have time to unpack all of that. That she literally decapitated her stepson, like that. I mean, we're already off to a pretty rough start. And this is like, I would say like not midway, like close to the beginning of the story. I mean, like this is like setting up the like main conflict. So then Marlinchin sees the boy again. I skipped a part. Let me rewind. After he gets decapitated, the mom like reattaches his head with like a bandage so that it looks like he's sitting there, and then she puts an apple in his lap and she puts him on the porch, the body. Marlinchin sees him. Now we're all caught up. I'm a little rusty at this. Marlinchin sees the boy and is like, "Can I have that apple?" And when he doesn't respond, the mom is like, "Oh, just give him a little slap. Like, he needs to listen to you." So Marlinchin like boxes his ear and like hits him, and his head like falls off. Obviously, it's attached by like a scarf, basically. So Marlinchin is now scarred for life. She starts sobbing, and the stepmom is like, "Don't worry, I'll clean up this mess for you. Don't even worry about it. I have it all handled." Which, like, let's just take a minute. The fact that not only was she like, "I'm gonna kill my stepson, and this is gonna be like validated and a good thing," but she did that and then was like, how do I make this more scarring? Oh, the daughter that I love with all of my heart? Yeah, let me scar her too. Let me just ruin her life, make her think that she murdered her brother, all because I want to get rid of him. Like, for her, but it's like for her. That is so jacked up. Like, that is so messed up. That just cannot be. I don't understand the, like, psychosis that this woman would be going through to be like, "Well, this is my plan." Like that, I wrote grossly diabolical in all caps. But it gets worse. Like, this isn't the worst part of it. Like, it gets worse. So then she decides that she's going to clean up the body by like literally like severing all the flesh. What is that called? Paring? Paring. Like Paring. Not like a pear, but like paring, like with a knife. She pares all the meat off the bone and then makes what's called like blood soup or like black pudding. In different versions, they say different things, whether it's a soup or a pudding. But basically, like, blood soup is just a form of soup that uses blood as like a main ingredient. And then black pudding is like a sausage that uses blood as like a huge ingredient in the sausage. She basically makes like, depending on the version, I'm going to say blood soup. She makes blood soup for the family with the boy's body. So she feeds it to everybody. And when the father is like, "Hey, where's my son?" She's like, "Oh, he went to go stay with my great uncle. So like he's not going to be around." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So she feeds the family this blood soup. Marlinchin like knows that it's their brother, like it's not like she doesn't know. And then the father makes a comment of like how delicious the food is. Like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. This soup is absolutely delectable. This is some of the best soup I've ever had." Like, so dark. Um, then she makes Marlinchin clean up the bones by wrapping them up in like a handkerchief and like burying them underneath the juniper tree. So not only does she scar this young girl for life, she feeds a father his son for dinner without his knowledge. Then she not only does all of this, but then is like, "I don't feel like cleaning up the rest. This is your mess." Even though it's not. Like, straight up, it's not her mess. She did nothing to deserve that. Like, what a vile woman. Like, I admire her. She's so bold and brave. She said, "This is what I want, and I'm gonna go get it." That is a strong woman. Now, do I agree with the choices she made? No, of course not. FBI, if you're listening, please don't put me on another watch list. But, I mean, she did that. She really did that. She said, "I don't like you. I don't want you around. I'm gonna get rid of you." Zip, bam, boom. Done. I mean, what more could you say? She's kind of an icon. She does what she wants. Anyway, this is pretty much like midway through the story now. We're like almost there. Then amidst the burying of the bones and under the tree and whatever, this like huge mist like starts to form around the tree, like a very mystical mist. And this magical, beautiful bird, like I think it's typically depicted as like a white dove scenario, like a white bird, because it's supposed to like represent the Holy Spirit, but like we talk about that a little bit later. But it sort of like emerges from the mist and flies into the town. It visits the local town and sings like a beautiful song about the brutal murder that the stepmother committed. And he sings it to the goldsmith, and the goldsmith says, "If you sing this song again, I'll give you a gold chain." And the bird is like, "Dope." And then the bird sings it to the shoemaker, and the shoemaker's like, "Can you sing it again? And I'll give you a pair of red shoes." And the bird is like, "Sick." And then he sings it to the miller, and then the miller is like, "If you sing it again, I'll give you a millstone." And the bird is like, "That's pretty awesome. I'll definitely take that." So now the bird has a gold chain, a pair of red shoes, and a millstone. So the bird goes back to the house and delivers the gold chain to the father, delivers the red shoes to Marlinchin, and then it cuts to the stepmother, who is constantly complaining about the quote-unquote raging fires within her arteries. Wow. And then this is kind of revealed to be like the cause of her like anger towards the world and everybody. Is this sort of like burning feeling in her stomach, in her arteries, in her life, whatever. So it's kind of like the real cause, the root cause of like all of her anger. So she goes outside to sort of like get some relief in like the cool, fresh air. And the bird drops the millstone on her head, which kills her instantly. Pretty nice way to go as far as like instant murder. I think that's a pretty kind end. Could have been a brutal murder. Like, what is that in Little Red? Spoilers, where he like cuts the wolf open, and then in some versions they like put maybe I'll do an episode on that. If you'd like to see an episode on Little Red Riding Hood, let me know. But then they like put stones in his tummy and like make him run, right? Or is that just an Into the Woods? I don't know. I'd have to do more research into that. If you'd like an episode on Little Red, though, that might be coming in the future. So now that I'm thinking about it, that would be a good one. But I think an instant kill for this vile woman who like abused this boy like all of his life is like a pretty easy end for her. Like it could have gone a lot worse for her. And then there's like a huge, like fiery, like smoky flame blast, like a phoenix. And it turns out that the bird is actually the boy. Crazy. It's not like we couldn't have guessed that. It's like not really that hidden of a fact. He emerges from the flames to reunite with his family. And then in the book, it's like stated that they go in to eat lunch and then they live happily ever after. But like they celebrate and like eat lunch. Like that's part of it, is like they go and eat lunch. Like I just think that's a weird, I just feel like that's a weird thing to be like, and they celebrated with lunch. Like, what? I don't understand the, why lunch? What did lunch have to do with anything? Why? I don't, I don't understand. It seems weird to me, but I didn't make famous stories, so I can't really talk. I talk into a microphone, so, you know, different kinds of mediums. That's pretty much it. That's the whole story. There are a couple things I wanted to talk about that are like just really interesting about this story in particular that I didn't know. I knew this story going into it. I had heard it before. I sort of knew the basic premise. But I didn't know these little facts about it. I haven't read the original text, sue me. But one thing that's really interesting to note is that none of the characters in the stories have a name except for the daughter. So like it's the boy, the father, the stepmother, the first wife, but then it's Marlinchin. Like she has a name, so her importance in the story is kind of elevated because she's the only character that you, I guess, feel attached to because she has a name. It's like when you're they always say, oh, I don't know who they is. I'm making shit up. But I've heard that like when you are on a farm, you're not supposed to name the animals. Like if you're on like a farm for pigs or like a dairy farm or whatever, because you know animals die a lot, and especially if you're on a slaughter farm where like they slaughter pigs or whatever, you're not supposed to name the pigs because then you get too attached to them. When they don't have names, it's easier to do your job. So I think that's sort of a clever tool to use in this story because there is so much like murder and like awful things happening. The only person that really takes the death like in a bad way is Marlinchin, who is the only one that has a name. So you feel like so much pain for her because you feel more attached to her, you know who she is, versus like it's the stepmother. Like what does that have to do with anything? Like you don't feel as bad for the stepmother in any scenario because she doesn't have a name. It was just like a clever little thing that I was like, oh, this makes sense because that way you don't feel as bad when the boy dies either because he doesn't have a name. You're not focused on his death. You're focused on how it affects the family and like the tools that the death sort of like teaches you versus like the death itself, if that makes sense. Because the death isn't important. It's like what happens afterwards that is. So it's just interesting to note. I wrote down the song lyrics because I didn't write them down earlier. Shoot me. But it's a weird song and I didn't want to like stop the flow of the story with it. But I want to know what tune they imagined this to because I don't know what it would be. So I'm going to read it like it's like a poem, but like stick with me. It's not the best. My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister, little Marlinchin, gathered together all my bones, tied them in a silken handkerchief, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Kiwit, kiwit, what a beautiful bird I am. What? Like, it's like he's stating facts. Like, it's not a song. He's just stating facts. Like, I got killed and eaten. Kiwit, kiwit. And the way that it's written, like, phonetically is like KYWITT. Like, that's how it's written. So, like, what? Kiwit, kiwit. Like, I get the noise it's trying to make, but, like, what a weird way to like, I guess, get the, like, onomatopoeia out there. Like, I don't know. Just a weird sound to try to write down. I think they did the best they could, but it's definitely weird. Not the, I just want to know like what tune, like what's the vibe, because like the lines don't have a steady rhythm, so like there's nothing to really like base anything off of. It's just kind of like a poem. Like, I would say it's more of like a poem, but they call it a song. Maybe the birds sing. I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. Um, the last thing that they kind of like touch on a lot in the story is this sort of like, and especially with Brothers Grimm, a lot of their stories have a lot of like religious backgrounds to them. They like to use a lot of like religious imagery, and metaphor and stuff like that. And this story is no different. The mother is like super devoted to God. She's supposed to be like devoted to God, prays for this child. God gives them this beautiful child. She dies of happiness from this child that God gave. Like, she's the good one, and then like the stepmother is never seen like praying to God. She's supposed to be sort of like an offshoot or like a worshiper of the devil. Like, that's why like she feels fire in her arteries and why she's such a vile woman. Like, she worships the devil is like sort of the I guess like intended message as far as like her story arc goes. Um but just interesting to note, there are a lot of stories that Brothers Grimm does that have sort of a religious undertone to them, because at the time, like, think of it, it's like 1800s, like that's sort of a decade when religion reigned very supreme, and especially in Germany, I think is where they're from. Religion is important to them. Clearly, they literally started a war over it. So to sort of have this Christianity sort of like weaved into a children's tale, you're sort of like imparting that feeling of religion upon the child without them necessarily knowing. And then when they go to church and they're sort of connecting the dots between like, oh, this was a story that I read, but it has these religious things in it. Religion must be something that's important and real. Why would it be in my kid's book if it's not? Like, it just kind of stirs up this whole feeling. I don't really know how to describe it. It sort of enforces the ideals of, that's a good way to put it. It enforces the ideals of Christianity, and religion as a whole onto the child before they can fully understand what that is. Sort of giving them a belief system and teaching them morals and right from wrong in a religious way. And something that's interesting to note, I've had a couple conversations with people. I myself consider myself to be agnostic. And for those of you that don't know what that means, it basically means that like I don't subscribe to any organized religion. But I do believe that there is something. I like to think that there's something out there, whether it's a god, whether it's multiple gods, whether it's the universe, whatever you want to call it. I don't really care, but I do like to think that there's something out there sort of maintaining karmic debt throughout the world. I believe karma is a very real thing. But I had a conversation recently with someone that considers himself to be very Christian. And they used to be Catholic. And it was a very interesting conversation to sort of talk about like, okay, well, what made you move away from Catholicism and move into just saying that you are like a non-denominational Christian? Oh, well, I didn't believe in the stuff they were teaching. Okay, but all the stuff they're teaching comes from the Bible. So, what does that say about your belief system? And they were having a really hard time sort of wrapping their head around the fact that like the Bible is not the end all, because when you grow up in a culture, in a community that makes you believe that this fictional book, because that's what it is, it's a storybook full of morals, come at me, that's what it is, this fictional book with like these narratives and stuff, when you grow up sort of learning morals that way, it's hard for you to wrap your brain around the fact that people can learn morals or they can learn the same things without religion as a tool. Because in the end, what is religion, if not a tool to teach morality? is really what people see it for, and a way to explain the unexplainable. Now we're in this era where so much of the things that we didn't understand before are explainable because we have all these scientific advances, but people still need a way to teach morals. And so they sort of use religion as this tool to do that. And I think that Brothers Grimm, tying it all back, that was a tangent. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Didn't think I was going to get into that conversation today. But sort of Brothers Grimm uses that tool a lot. They'll weave in sort of religious moral undertones into their stories so that not only you're getting the moral of like, I mean, to me, the moral of this story would be karma's a bitch if you are, which is one of my favorite sayings of all time, forever and ever. Karma is a bitch if you are. She was this awful, terrible woman. She killed him by decapitating him. She got hit in the head with a millstone. Done. Like, not only did these poor people that had nothing to do with it get punished, but then they got rewarded because they dealt with the punishment and they did not complain. They didn't do anything. And then she got a pair of red shoes. He got a gold chain. They got their son back. Like, it's sort of like a karmic debt story, which is probably the reason why I like it so much. Karmic debt is one of those things that I truly believe in, like really wholeheartedly. I'm like, if you do something bad, it's gonna bite you in the ass. Like it has to. Otherwise, like the world wouldn't work that way. And it might not come for a year or two. You could do something terrible and like it'll hit you like 40 years down the line, but it's gonna happen. And I think that's sort of the moral basis of this story. But then there's that undertone of like, also, if you worship God, that makes your karmic debt less. Because nothing happened to the mother when she died, but the stepmother worshipped the devil, and look what happened. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a Christianity's great, and you should totally do it, and it's amazing and wonderful, and like it's just interesting to sort of, especially as an adult with different religious views, to sort of go back and read these stories or research them and sort of see the underlying that's in them. That like I'm sure like when you see you won't see Disney do this, but when you see Disney sort of take stories and adapt them, they sort of leave this part out unless it's very important to the story. Like in Hunchback, religion is like very important, but in like Snow White, there's more religious undertones and they kind of cut it out. Which I think is smart because then you're still getting the moral of the story without the religious aspect to it. So it can be more accepted and adaptable to many different situations. But it's just something interesting to note, especially in these older fairy tales, when you go back and read them and you sort of see like the random mentions of like God and the devil. And you're like, why is that there? Like, what purpose does that serve at all to the story? And the answer is conformity, religious conformity. We love a cult. That's pretty much all I have to talk about today, as far as the episode goes. I know this one was a little bit shorter, and I'm a little bit scatterbrained right now. I'm getting back into this. It's muscle memory for sure, but I'm definitely out of podcast shape. It's been a bit. I've had a lot going on. Again, if you want to know a little bit more about me and you want to know what sort of happened there, you can always check out my Instagram. It's up there for the world to see, so you can always see that if you really want to. If not, just bear with me. My scatterbrainedness will definitely go down as I start doing more episodes and I get a little bit more grounded into how this works again. I also just got back to New York. I was staying in Ohio, as many of you know, with my family and my boyfriend's family. And now I am back in New York in our apartment, and I'm trying to figure out a nice setup that works, that is quiet. So if there's a little bit of echo or the sound is off, I apologize. I'm still trying to figure out a setup that works, but I wanted to get an episode out there as soon as I got back. What else? I do have some cute little merch options that are prototyped out, and I'm going to be taking a little bit of a mini photo shoot. I've been wearing them for probably like a month or two now, without really telling anybody what it is. I have those with me. I'm going to be taking pictures in them, doing a mini photo shoot and sort of posting those. So keep your eyes open on social media. I know I keep saying that I'm going to do that, but I've had a lot of other things going on. Like I had surgery and I was in the hospital and stuff like that. And now I'm finally in a place where I think I'm comfortable enough to like take a breath. So you'll start to see some of that stuff going up soon. Please, 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 if you have any comments or questions or concerns or just any nice comments, I've had a couple people reach out recently and say that they really missed the podcast and that they wanted to come back. I've had people give me ideas for future episodes. I love hearing from you guys. I love hearing from the listeners because the more you guys communicate with me, the more I can create a better show for you guys that both of us enjoy doing. It just makes sense. You can shoot me an email. The email is whispersfrombelow@gmail.com. No spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. Or you can send me a message on Instagram. I'm a Gen Z, so I'm on Instagram pretty much all the time. I don't really leave my phone. So if you send a message, I'll probably get back to you pretty shortly. That Instagram is Whispers From Below. There's no spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. If you want to follow me, if you care at least a little bit about my life, you can follow me too. That's at JUTIN_GEESE, Judd and Geese. And I think that's pretty much it. Remember, the stepmother worshiped the devil. Religious undertones are literally everywhere. And wash your hands. Stay safe. It's not gone yet, but we're getting there.